Introduction to Dart. In this particular section, we're going to look at what is Dart first. Now, Dart is an open source general purpose programming language developed by Google. It is designed for building web, server, and mobile application. Dart is often used with Flutter to create cross platform mobile apps. The language is known for its performance and ease of use, particularly in developing modern web and mobile apps. Now, some of the key features of Dart include it's object oriented. So, Dart is object oriented, which means it uses classes and objects for code structure and organization. So, if you have any knowledge of object oriented programming from before, this will be much easier. Next, it's strongly typed. Dart is statically typed, meaning type checks are performed at compile time. It's also asynchronous programming, which means Dart supports asynchronous programming using features like future and async await. If you've used JavaScript or something, you're probably familiar with this. Another feature is its rich standard library. Dart comes with a robust standard library that includes built-in types, collections, and utilities for tasks like input, output, or I/O and networking. Now, setting up for Dart environment, for that, first you have to go to the Dart website, which is dart.dev, and then on the top right, you can check out the website, and you can, if you look at this, Dart 3.4 is live. That's the latest version. You can check the blog post at the time of recording. This was the latest version. If you want to go and play with it, you can go to try Dart. If you want to get Dart, you can click on get Dart, and it will tell you all the different platforms that it supports. Now, by default, if you scroll down, you'll probably see that you can install for Windows following these commands. So if you have a Windows machine, follow along by installing these. Next, if you have Linux, follow along using these instructions. And for in this machine, I'm going to run, since I'm using a Mac OS, I'm going to use these instructions. So I'm going to first, before doing any of these, I'm going to open my terminal because that's what I need. And I'm going to check if Dart actually exists on my machine. I'm going to say dart dash version, and as you see, I've never used Dart before, or in this machine I've never used it. I'm going to make it a little bigger so it's much more clear of what I'm doing. And then here are the instructions to follow. So first, if you need Homebrew for this. If you don't have Homebrew installed, just go here and then install Homebrew using this command. I already have Homebrew installed. I can check by saying brew, and you'll see it will not give me an error, so which means Homebrew is installed. Next, I'm going to use this as the official tab for Dart and install it. It's going to take a few seconds, minutes, depending on what all it needs, and it will install that on your machine. So that's the first step. Next step, it says brew install Dart. So we have the tab installed. Now install Dart. So once Dart is installed, it's giving me an error saying installing Dart from Dart line Dart. Your command line tools are too outdated. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I have all the updated stuff on my machine. So once I complete all these installations, I'm going to go clear. And again, let's look at Dart dash dash version. Did it get installed? Still didn't work. So let's go ahead and run that command one more time. Let's clear it. Once it's done doing whatever it has to do, let's check the Dart version. And there you go. We have Dart installed successfully. The stable version 3.4.4 is installed on this machine, which means now we can start programming. Now, next step is installing all the IDEs that are required for this particular training series. So we're going to go ahead and do that. For this particular video series, some of the tools that we need are Visual Studio Code, we would need Android Studio, and we would need Xcode. So I have some tools already installed, but I'm still going to go over them. So for Visual Studio Code, you can go to code.visualstudio.com, and then it will say download for macOS or download for Windows, depending on which platform you have. You can select this. It will automatically take you by default on the home page. It will take you based on which computer you are on. Since I am on Mac, I'm going to go here and click download, and it will start downloading. If it doesn't download, you can click on the link here and go through the steps and install it. So once you download it, you can probably go and open it, and it will look like this. There'll be nothing, no recent projects. There'll be a bunch of options here, but we'll see when we have to use it. So go ahead and install this properly. Next, Android Studio. Again, when you go to the Android Studio homepage, it will say download Android Studio. Go ahead, click on it, accept whatever it says, and depending on, for Apple there's two different devices, one with Intel chip, one with Apple chip. I have the one with Apple chip, so I'm going to download that one and we'll start downloading and dismiss. And for Xcode, which I have already installed, you can click on download. Now on a Windows machine it's not possible, but if you have a Mac, it will take you to the App Store, or you can go to App Store and search for Xcode, and it will show you Xcode. It will give you a download option here. If you have already installed, it will give you open option. Once you install it, you can open Xcode and it will start jumping here. It will open in a couple of seconds, and once it opens, you'll probably see here, based on what projects you have done before, it will show those projects here. You can clear your recent history by saying file, open recent, clear menu, and then when you open Xcode again, it will not show anything, and it will look something like this for you when you first time open it and give you a bunch of options. Let's look at Android Studio. So I have Visual Studio, we went to Xcode. Now let's look at Android Studio. It will start up and it will give you this options where it says welcome. The wizard will guide you through. You can go through this, choose the type of setup you want. This is standard. It will ask you what type of emulators or other things that you want. I'm going to keep it default. You'll have to go and accept all the agreements here. I can go and accept. Make sure that accept, you select the top one and it will accept all of them, and it will start downloading all the tools that you need for your Android Studio. Let's go and run our first Dart program. The way to do it is either we can open Visual Studio Code and create a new file. In this particular file, I can select a file type or file name. So I'm going to go ahead and say I want to create something called as hello.dart, and I'll save it. For now, I'm just going to save it on desktop just because we are creating a sample file. Say let it access my, and here I'm going to write some basic hello Dart function. So I'm going to go ahead and say void main. Now this is, let me just increase the size. That is the first application. This is the first function, void main. Main is the first function that it will run. Void is, it says what type of function type it is. If it returns something, that's what you pass in the start, but this is not going to return me anything. But this is the basic definition of the first function that runs when an application runs. I'm going to here go ahead and say print hello, say Dart, not hello world. So this is my very first application. Now save this file, and then now we can go back to our terminal and open desktop, and inside that I should have that hello Dart file. Now to run this file, I'll probably just say Dart hello Dart, and it should print it out right there. Now this is our first hello Dart file. Next thing that we want to do is this. Go here, go to the Dart website, and you see the try Dart. Now if you don't want to install all the tools and everything, you can just go here and it will give you an editor with some code initially. It also has samples here, and you can run this project right here where it has a for loop and it has a bunch of things. So initially let's start this with this. I am going to go ahead and copy my code from here, go back here, paste it here, run it. Should have the same output, shouldn't be any different, and there you go, hello Dart. Now let's look at some of the syntax of Dart before we go deep into learning more on Dart. So first is always the comments. If I want to add comments, I'm going to use /. This is my single line comment. So single line comment meaning it just comments one single line. If you want to write a multiple line comment like any other programming language, I can just do this. You don't need these stars in between. Everything is commented in between, but it just looks pretty. So that's why that's one option. This is a multi-line comment. Make sure this is closed. If there's space in between, it will think that you have not yet closed the comment. So this is multi-line comments. If I run it, only this will run, not the about to. Next thing, variables. Now when you want to create variables, variables are things that you want to change in future. You can change that. For example, I'm going to say name equal to hello Dart, and then here say print name. So what this will do is this creates a variable called as name, and it will print here. By saying variable, it will automatically look at what value is on the other side and assign that value. So this is string value, that's what we call it, and that's what will be assigned. Next, if you want to create an integer specifically, you can say int, say age equal to 5. I want to print that age. I can run that, get rid of this because it's giving me a warning below, and it takes the value and runs it. We also have double. I'm going to just get rid of all this code. I don't need to print it. I hope you trust when I say something, hopefully. So I'm going to say double height equal to 1.75. That's how you give double values. It will say the value is not used, but I'm just showing you some examples. Next one that we want to look at is control flows. Control flows are conditional statements. For example, if I want to give a if loop saying if I want to check something, if age of someone is greater than 18, let's say I create a int age equal to 7. If age is greater than 18, I want to say print adult. Else I want to print minor. So in this case, what happens is it's going to check the age variable, which is 7, and check if it qualifies. If it qualifies, it's going to go and run this print adult. If it doesn't, it will run the second else statement. If I run this, it's going to say since it's 7 here, it's going to go run through this function and come on. It will tell me if this person is adult or minor. If I say this is 37, run it, it will say adult. So this is how if loops work. We also have for loops, which you probably already saw when we did the print statement. For loop is going through, like if loop is conditional, for loop is a loop where I can go over thing again and again. So for example, I'm creating a variable here. So the way for loop works is you give the initializer for I equal to 0, then give the condition if I is less than 5, and then what do you want to do? Increment it by 1. So what it does is it will run this particular piece of code, whatever I write here, 0 to 5 times. If you see less than 5, which means it will not run 5, it will run 5 times because it will run for 0, then increment it by 1 to 1, then 2, then 3, and 4 and 5. So it's going to run whatever is inside here. So for example, I want to print value of I, run it, it will print 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So when as soon as it sees, oh, the value of I now is 5, and it's only should run for I is less than 5, so it's going to stop and give this print function. Now you can also create functions. Now this is the main function that runs automatically, or first thing that your compiler will look for, and here I can call another function. So you can say, you can call functions by saying void, let's say greet string name. So it takes a parameter of name, and inside that function I'll say print hello, and if I want to add that variable inside, you just use $sign and the variable name, in this case NAME, and give an exclamation mark. So now what happens is, now from main function I can just say greet Vivian, run that, give that as a string output to this function, run it, and it will say hello Vivian. If I say Sam, run this, it will say hello Sam. So this is how you can create functions where you say what is the return type. So if this function is going to return something, that is the type. For example, if it was returning just the string, it will be string here. But in this case, since nothing is coming back out of this function, you don't need to specify what return type is. So these are some of the basic overview to get you started. In the next section, we will delve deeper into Dart's basic syntax, variables, and data types. Let's look at the basics of Dart programming. First, we'll start with variables and data types. Now in Dart, variables are used to store data. You can declare a variable using the var, final, or const keywords. The data types of the variable is inferred from the assigned value, or it can be explicitly specified. Let's first look at variable declaration. Now using var, you can set here name equal to Dart, which will take name as a string value. Age equal to 5, age will be integer type. Height equal to 1.75, which is a double type. Using final, the variable's value cannot be changed after it's initialized. So this is more like I'm saying its final value is San Francisco. The name of this city will not change ever. That's the final. Next, const. The variable is a compile time constant, so its value cannot change during the application. So if you want to save some variables and name and change its values, you use var keyword. If you want to assign something and keep it that forever, you use final, and const is used for constant compile time constant variables. Next, let's look at data types. Dart supports various data types. First, let's look at numbers. If you want to directly assign value, like instead of saying var, you can say int age equal to 30, double height equal to 5.9. Next, we can look at strings, where I'm saying string name equal to Dart and string greeting equal to hello Dart. Now this represents the text. Strings represent text values. Next, booleans. Booleans represents true or false values. The way to assign them is you say bool is visible, true, bool is completed, equal to false. That's how there's only two values, true and false, for booleans. Lists. Lists are order collection of objects. So the way you create lists is saying I'm saying list, and this list contains all integers which are named numbers, and this is how you give by square brackets 1 2 3 4 5. And then I'm creating a list of fruits by, I'm not specifically saying that this is a list of strings. If I wanted to do what I've done up here, I'll probably change this to list and then say string inside here and fruits, but it automatically assigns them. You can say apple, banana, cherry, or anything that you want. Next is collection or key value pairs, or some programming languages call it hash, some people call it dictionaries. So this is how it looks like, where it has key value pairs inside it using the curly brackets. I'll say math is 90, science is 85, English is 95. Now you say key is of the type string and value is of the type integer, and I'm saying this is a map. Now let's go ahead and based on whatever we learned, let's create a project or a file where I'm saying void main, this is the main function. I'm saying I'm going to create a variable Alice, age is 25, constant is pi 3.14159. I'm creating two numbers, integer and height. I'm taking a greeting hello dollar name, and this dollar, whenever you see dollar name inside quotes, it will take the value of the variable name. Boolean is student true. I'm creating a list of hobbies, reading, swimming, and traveling. Creating a map of string is to string, which means key is also string, value is also string, city is San Francisco, state is California. These are the two items that I have in my map, and then I will print it out. Now I'll print the greeting, print the age, and this is what the output will look like. If you want to run this code, you can just take this, create a separate one, save it, and go to my say test.dart. It says hello Alice. Let's look at the hello Alice. Age is 25, value of pi, year, height is student true. So you kind of give like variables using the dollar sign and pass it inside quotes, and it will print out the values of those. So this is an example of that. Let's go back, and next let's look at some basic operators. Now Dart provides a variety of operators to perform different operations on variables and values. First ones that I'm going to look at is arithmetic operators. Now you already know these. One is addition, where I can just use the plus sign and value, and the sum of this will be 10 plus 5 is 15. Next is subtraction, where you just use the minus sign and 10 minus 5 will be 5. Next is multiplication. For multiplication, we use the star. 10 times 5 equal to 50. That is the value of variable product. Next, we have division, where I'm saying quotient equal to 10 divided by 5, and 5 times 2 is 10. So the value of this will be 2. Next, we also have the modulus operator, which gives the remainder. So in this case, 10 divided by, or 10 mod 3 is 3 times 3 is 9, and whatever is left is 1. So that's how this works. Next, so these are the arithmetic operations. Next let's look at comparison operators. Now for comparison operators, I have equal to, where I am checking if 10 is, so use double equal to in equal to comparison operator, and it will check 10 is equal to 10. If left hand side equal to right hand side, it will give the value true. If 10 double equal to 11, it will give false in here. Next, not equal to, which is opposite of equal to, saying 10 is not equal to 5, that's true, it will give true value. Not equal to is done by exclamation mark and equal to. Next, we have greater than. Greater than works where I'm asking, is 10 greater than 5? What is the value of this? I'm just asking logically. Let's say 10 is 10 greater than 5? That's yes. So that's the value is true. If I say print 5 less than, using the using this sign less than 10, it will say true. I can also show greater than equal to. So is 10 greater than equal to 10? Yes, it is equal, so it will be true. If I have 15 greater than equal to 10, that will also show me true, because 15 will be greater than 10. Next, I have less than or equal to. So is left hand side less than or equal to 10? It's true, so it will print true for me. That's how we do less than equal to. So that kind of completes our comparison operators. Now let's look at logical operators. Now with logical operators, it's more about logic. If you have used AND or XOR, NOT, all these various. So we'll look at AND. AND is used by double AND sign. If true and false, in this case, the value will be false, because both of them needs to be true to have the value true. That's the AND logical operation. For OR, we have used double pipe. In this case, true or false, in this case is true, because for OR, either one of them needs to be true, so that's why it's true. I can also use the not, which exclamation mark. I can say not true, the answer is false. So that's how you can use the not logical operator. Next, let's look at the assignment operators. We saw some of them already, but let's look at the first one, which is equal to assignment operator, where I am assigning the value of 10 to the variable a. We also have add and assign, which is where I'm saying the value of a is 10. This is the assignment operator. Then I'm saying a plus equal to 5. So in this case, what happens is it will take the value of 10 and then add 5 more to it. This is add and assign. So now the value of a will be 15. Next, we have subtract and assign. So similar to add, but it will do is it will take the value of a, which is 10, and subtract 5 from it. Now the value of a is 5. Multiply and assign, you guessed it. It multiplies whatever the value of a is with whatever we give here. 10 times 5 is 50. Similarly, we have divide and assign. So slash equal to, let's go divide 10 by 5 and the value is 2. Now let's look at this in an example program. So I'm going to create this program where I am going through all the arithmetic operators. We are printing all the values. Then we have comparison operators where we are printing all those values there, and logical operators where I'm checking this. Assignment operators where I'm assigning, incrementing by 5, subtracting and assigning by 5, multiply, assigning by 5. You can copy this and remove everything here, save it, and run that program. It says there's an error. A value of the type double can't be assigned to a variable of the int dot. So I think I have assigned this. So the problem here is it takes variable a equal to 10, and then it kind of thinks that a is 10, and I'm trying to change it to double here. Let's do this. Variable c equal to 10, and then I will say that c, so 0.0, so it's a double type, 0.0, so both of them are double. C $C, let's run it, and there you go, it gives me the value of 2.0. So that's something that is very interesting, that if you're doing an operation on an integer or assigning a value of integer to something, it thinks that it's an integer, and if you can't change it to double afterwards, so you have to be very careful while doing this. So next, let's look at control flow. We already looked at some of the control flow statements, but let's go through them in more detail. Now, control flow statements allow you to control the execution of code based on conditions or loops. Dart supports several control flow statements that we saw earlier, including if else, switch, and loops like for, while, and do while. So we saw some of them before, but let's go in more detail now. So if else statement. So I have my void main. I'm saying int of age equal to 20. So I'm creating a variable of the type integer and I'm assigning the value 20. Now I'm checking here if age is greater than or equal to 18. Is age greater than or equal to 18? Yes, it is, because it's 20. So then it will print this statement. If it was 2 in this particular case, it's less, so it will print you are a minor. So that's how if else statement works. The if else statement executes a block of code if a specified condition is true in this particular case. If the condition is false, then another block of code is executed using that else statement. You can also use else if to check multiple conditions. So what does that mean? So with multiple conditions, you have the score of 85. Now in this grading system, if score is greater than 90, then we print grade A. Else if score, so I'm kind of iterating over using if else, else if, saying that, oh, it's greater than 80, then B, greater than 70, then C. Else if none of them work, then the student got grade D. Next, let's look at the switch case. Now the switch statement evaluates an expression and executes the corresponding case block. It is useful when you have multiple possible values for a variable. So in this particular case, we have the main function where I'm saying string grade equal to B, and I am going to switch or run a particular block of code based on the value of grade. So that's how you write switch, and you pass the expression here, in this particular the variable string, saying switch based on whatever is inside here, do that. So if grade was A, it would say print excellent and break out from it. If it doesn't match this, it's going to check this one, or if it doesn't work, then this one. So it's similar to else if, but it will directly jump. So I'm going to say switch grade is B, it will directly jump here. It's not going to go and check each one of them every time. So it's better in this case do a switch instead of if else, where depending on what the value is, it will directly jump to that loop, and it will not have to go through else if bunch of different types. So that's what switch block is used for. Next, we have the for loop. The for loop is used to execute a block of code a specific number of times based on what the condition is. So in this particular case, I have the main function. Inside that I have for loop, where I'm saying I equal to 0. What is the specified condition? I is less than 5. If I is less than 5, in this case when it starts, the value is 0. So it's going to say, oh, the first time when I run it, the iteration is 0. Then after this entire thing is run, it's going to execute this and say I plus plus, increment the value of I by 1. Now when I come inside this for loop again, the value of I is 1. It's going to say iteration 1, increment by 1 more. So it's going to print 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the value now is 5. It's going to check if I is less than 5, so 5 is not less than 5, so it's going to jump out of this and then end the execution. Next, we have while loop. The while loop executes a block of code as long as a specified condition is true. So in this particular case, I have count equal to 0. Now while count is less than 0, when it runs here, it'll check, is the count value less than 0? I mean less than 5? It is, since it's 0. So it's going to go and print count equal to 0. And then here I'm incrementing the value of count by 1. And then now the value of count is 1, which is again less than 5. So it's going to run again and say 1, 2, 3, 4. And now when the value of count is incremented to 5, so 5 is less than 5, nope, it's going to come out. The funny part is if you remove this and you run the program, it will just say count 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and keep on going count 0, count 0, count 0, keep on printing, because the while loop will be executed constantly. So you have to be very careful when you write while loops that it has a condition that it will not meet in future, so it will stop that loop. Next, let's look at the do while loop. Now the do while loop is similar to while loop, but it guarantees that the block of code is executed at least once, because the while is written after the first time execution. Let's look at an example. count equal to 0. So it's going to go inside this do while loop where it's going to go and print count is 0 and increment the count, and then it will look for conditions, whereas in this it was looking for condition before. So now it's 0, so it will say less than 5. Sorry, in this case it will be 1 because it will run this print 0 and then it will increment by 1 and it will say, oh, 1 is less than 5. Then we're going to run again. So until it reaches 5, which is not less than 5. So it will say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's do while loop. Let's do an example code here where we use all the things that we learned. So we have main if else loop where I'm checking the grid with switch case. I am looking at running the loop. I am also running the while loop and the do while loop right here. So let's go ahead and run this, copy this code into here and run using our, and there you go. So we have, since the value of its age is 20, so it's going to run the first one, you are an adult is what's going to print out. Next, switch case where grade is B, so that will jump directly here and say print good. So that's why it's printing good and break out of this particular statement, go here, and then now it's going to run this for loop from I is equal to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's why you see this here. Then in while loop it starts count from 0 and it checks and it will say count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 in this particular case. The next count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 is coming from the do while loop, and that's the output that you will show. So this completes the basic of Dart programming. If you have any questions, let me know in comments and we'll jump into the next section right now. Functions and methods. Functions and methods are fundamental building blocks in Dart, which enables you to encapsulate code for reuse and modularity. Let's look at first example, which is, let's go ahead and define some functions. So a function is a block of code that performs a specific task. In Dart, functions are defined using return type, function name, and parameter syntax. So that's how the way it looks like is you have your return type, function name, and parameters inside the bracket. Now in this case we don't have any parameters, but this is a basic function where we have the first function which always runs when the code is run, which is void main, and it's going to say print greeting. So this will call, this is the invocation of another function which that prints a greeting message, so which is this function. So it's going to go here and it will run this and oh, where is the print greeting function? Right here. So and then it will print hello Dart. I'm going to run this on my, there you go. So it's, if I say print Dart hello Dart, it will print hello Dart here. Just clear this out. Next, let's look at function parameters. Now functions can accept parameters which allow you to pass values into the function. There are first which are positional parameters where parameters are passed in order. So that means, for example, in this particular case, as soon as I run this application, it will say, it will run this void main and print greeting, and I'm passing the parameter string here, string name. It will take that Dart and assign that variable's name or parameter's name to Dart, whatever I pass here, and print this out for me saying hello $name, and I'll see that right here, hello Dart. I mean, the output is not anything different. So these are positional parameters. Depending on where the position is, you can have multiple of them separated by comma. There's also next one which is name parameters. In name parameters, parameters are passed by name, improving readability. In this particular case, you can give it in any order, but if you see here, by giving this brackets, these curly brackets, I am saying the string name, which means the name will be passed as a parameter with colon and what its value is right here. So you can have multiple ones of these also, and you can give name, age, and bunch of different things and pass it to there. So this kind of improves your readability and you know how it works. So it's pretty awesome. Next one that we're going to look at is, so named parameters. Next one is optional parameters. Now optional parameters can be made optional by enclosing them in square brackets. So for example, in this particular case, I have print greeting string name equal to world. So when I call this print greeting, it's going to take the value. Since I'm not passing anything here, it will automatically default it to world, and it'll say print hello world. In second case, when I say print greeting Dart, it will take this value Dart and pass it to name. So in this case, it will print hello Dart. So that's how you can pass optional parameters. Next, let's look at return values. Now, functions can return values using the return statement to the line of code that actually called that function. For example, in this particular case, I'm not printing anything in the add. I'm saying int a and b, and this particular function is not returning void, which means it's going to return integer in this case, since I said int. And then it will take a and b, add these numbers, and pass that value of this a and b addition to whoever called it. For example, this is my main function here. I'm saying int sum equal to, so I'm saying sum equal to, call the function add and pass the values 10 and 5. So this variable is waiting for this function to get over and return back the value of this 10 plus 5, which is 15, will be assigned to sum. And if I print this out, it will say sum is 15. So that's how return values work. Next, we have lambda functions, or sometimes called as anonymous functions, and in some other languages they're also called closures, or whatever you call them in whatever language you use. But lambda functions or anonymous functions are functions without a name, so they will not have a name. They're often used for short operations. For example, in this particular case, in my main function, I'm saying variable number. So I'm creating a list here of 1 2 3 4 5, and then I am saying numbers for each. Now instead of calling a particular function here, I am saying I want to call a function which doesn't have a name. So it doesn't have a name in the front, but this takes a parameter of number, and this is the body of the function where it will print that particular number. So I could have just written a function and then put it over here and put this values inside the function, but I'm just doing it in line as an anonymous function or a lambda function right here. Now it's also arrow function, which is a short form where I can say numbers for each number, and then use the arrow which is equal to and greater than sign, and say print number. So instead of doing this, I can directly do this. You probably have seen this in other programming languages too, but that's how you use the arrow function. Let's go ahead and create a project with all these things that we have learned here. So I have added in my main, I have the positional parameters where I have the greet function. I am calling the greet Alice, which will call this function and print Alice. I have named parameters where I have name and age, and in this case I'm passing this name and age. Now they can be in any order because this is a named function. Optional parameters where I am using the square bracket and saying the default value is anonymous if you don't pass anything. For example, this function introduce, it will just say hi, I am anonymous. Whereas if you say Charlie, it will say hi, I am Charlie. Next, return values where I'm passing an integer value back, where for multiplication where I'm create product equal to multiply 4 by 5, and the value will be 20 in this case. And finally, lambda functions where I have that list that I displayed earlier, and I'm saying go through each of one of them, and also you show me how to use arrow function. So let's go ahead and run this particular function and see what we get. I'm going to say Dart hello Dart, and it's giving me an error. It's saying error. Okay, so one of the things that you have to know is if you're giving named parameters and they are being passed some other values other than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put question here which says optional, and then clear this and run again. So here it goes through each and every one again. It says greet Alice, so hello Alice, name is Bob and age is 30 based on this. Then I have these, hi, I'm anonymous, hi, I'm Charlie from here. Multiplication, it goes through the next one is product 20, and then here lambda function where it for each number, so for 1 2 3 4 5, for each of them it's going to call this function which is anonymous function and print the number 1 2 3 4 5. Same thing with the arrow function, is going to print 1 2 3 4 5. So this is this kind of covers our basic usage of functions and methods in Dart. Next we're going to look at object oriented programming in Dart. So let's jump directly into there where we will learn about classes, objects, inheritance, and more. Object oriented programming in Dart. Now, object-oriented programming, also called as OOP, is a programming paradigm based on the concepts of objects, which can contain data and code that manipulates that data. Dart is strongly typed object-oriented programming language with classes and objects. So if you've used classes and objects before, you'll probably be familiar with those and you can skip them, or this can be a good refresher. So first thing that we're going to look at in this particular project is classes and objects. Now a class is a blueprint for creating objects, which are also called instances of a class. Now class encapsulates data for object and methods to manipulate that data. Now think of it as like, I want to cook something, but I need a recipe. Now recipe is a class, whereas the food that you create is an instance of that particular class. It's like blueprints are a class, but the buildings that you build out of the blueprints are instances of that class. So let's go ahead and look at an example. In this particular, I have the class person. Now this is not actually a person, it's a blueprint of a person. When I'm saying this person has a string name, the person has an age, which are the properties of this particular class, and it has a method called as void introduce, where it prints, hi, my name is whatever the name of that person is, and I am $age years old. Now if you want to create this particular person, so this is a blueprint. Now if I want to create an object or an instance of this particular person, I'm going to say person equal to, so this is the name of the variable, this is the type, which is person, and I'm saying to create it, I'm going to call the person function. What this will do is it will create a person function with everything empty inside. The name will be nothing, age will be nothing. So I can now say person.name equal to Alice, person.age equal to 30, because that's integer. And when I say person.introduce, it will call this function, and since it already encapsulates these values, name and age, it will say, hi, my name is, what was the name? Alice, and I am, what was the age? 30 years old, and that's what it will print out. So this is the basic class definition. Now let's look at, first thing that we want to look at, constructors. Now constructors are special methods that are called when an object is initialized or instantiated. They can be used to initialize object properties, like all those properties that I mentioned earlier, were name and age. So let's take the same example where with the default constructor. Now default constructor is constructor that is automatically created for us. So let's look at an example. For example, here we have class person, string name and age. Now when you put the name of that particular class and say this dot name, this dot age, this will create the default constructor for you. So when you initialize a person, for example here, if you say person and then inside that give the name and the age, it will automatically initiate a person object with name and age. So you don't have to, like in some programming language, you'll have to actually write a function called as init and then do that. But in here, you can directly use this default constructor. And void introduce, same thing, it will do the same thing. This is an example of a default constructor. Next, let's look at a named constructor. Now, in case of named constructors, here I have my person, string name, string age. This is the default constructor, and I can always say person dot named constructor, and this will take name as the value. And in this particular case, I don't want to pass age, so I'm going to set age to 0 whenever that person is initialized. So I can do something like this here: person, the name of the class dot named constructor is Bob. In this case, Bob's age will be 0. If I set some other value here, it will use that as the default value. When I say person.introduce, it will say my name is Bob and I am 0 years old. So that's how the name constructor works. So you saw the difference between the default and the name constructors. So this helped you like kind of write different things for your object-oriented class. Next, let's look at instances and static variables. Now instance variables, they belong to an instance of the class. What do I mean by that? So for example, whatever we did before, the string color, this variable belongs to the instance of the class, which means when I am creating, for example here, the car is $color and is driving. So if I create a class object car, and initialize that object dot color equal to something, that's what the value will be. Whereas on the other hand, static variables, what that does is it will, no matter what, you can directly say car dot show number for, so even without having an instance of that particular class, you can call that particular function in this case. And the way you do that is by saying static void or static int. So even if you say car dot number of wheels, it will give me 4 as the value, which is what it's doing here. While I'm calling this function show number of wheels, it will call this function and will assign this value automatically. So static variables and functions are used to set some values even without initializing a particular instance of that particular class. Next, let's look at methods. Now methods are the functions that you write inside the particular class. Methods are functions defined inside a class that operate on instances of that particular class. So in this particular class, I have calculator. Now I've created a calculator instance, and then when you want to get the addition of two numbers, you can't directly call add function. You have to call the instance, which is this one, and then call it. Unless it's a static method where it says static in start, then you can directly use the name of the class and call it, and you don't need an instance. So this is how this methods work. Next, let's look at inheritance. Now inheritance allows you to create a new class based on an existing class. The new class inherits the properties and methods of the existing class. What do I mean by that? For example, here I have a class animal which has a function called as sound, and print animal makes a sound. Now I have another class here, dog, that extends animal, which means this particular class, and if you create a object out of this saying dog something, dog x equal to dog with brackets, call this, create this instance, and then you say dog dot sound, it will still call this because it extends this thing. So if I create an animal, it will not work with this, but when you create a dog instance, it will also have this in there. Now if you want to override this function, you can override it by calling the @override method and say void sound and print dog barks. You can have other functions also in here or other methods inside this particular class which will not apply to animal, but whatever you add inside animal will apply for dog unless you override it. So in this case, dog dot sound, it will say dog barks. It will not call this because you're overriding that function here. If I don't do this, it will call this function automatically because dog extends from animal. That's how inheritance works in object-oriented programming. Next, let's look at interfaces and abstract classes. Now abstract classes cannot be instantiated and are used to define common behavior that subclass must implement. So for example, I have an abstract class animal void sound. Now if you see in this particular class, I am not implementing this function. There's nothing happening here. I'm just defining the function in the method here saying void sound. When I create the class dog extends animal, I'm overriding it and I have to enter this. If I don't do this, it will give me an error saying that since your dog extends animal and it's an abstract class, you have to implement that particular function in there or method in there. Now when I create this main, I call dog dot sound. In this case, it will call dog barks. So that's how abstract classes work. Now next is we forgot about the interfaces. Now interfaces in Dart are all classes implicitly define an interface. So you can implement multiple interfaces. So for example, here I have the class flyer void fly print flying. I have another class bird which implements flyer override void fly print bird is flying. Now when you run this and then you say bird dot fly, bird is flying will work. So in this particular case, all classes implicitly define a particular interface. You can implement multiple interfaces, but that's how interfaces are defined. Next, let's look at mixins. Now mixins allow you to add functionality from multiple classes to a single class. What do I mean by that? So for example, here I have a mixin walker which has a function walk. I have a mixin swimmer which has a swim function which says print swimming. And then now I'm creating a class human with walker and swimmer. So in this case, what happens is human will actually, when you create an instance of this human and you say human.walk, it will look for that function in here inside this class. It's not there, it's going to look for inside walker, and it's there, it's going to call that. And then same thing for swim, it will call that particular function. So that's kind of covers most of the things. Let's go ahead and implement an example using all these things that we have done. So what I've done here is I've created a class person with name and age. I'm called the default constructor, and I've called the method over here void introduce. Another student extends, and in here I have the name, age, and this dot school, and I have super name and age because this extends the person. So this will also have super name and age in there, which will be passed from student. I'm overriding that introduce function method here. So instead of calling this, it will call this if I'm using the student class. I have an abstract class of athlete, which means in this case when the class runner extends person, which is inherit from this person class, it implements athlete, meaning this particular class implements this person. So we'll have to make sure that we have that perform inside here. Whereas for the other function, it will just take it from person, for example, the introduce function. So in here, what I'm doing right now is just, where did I go? Okay, implement person, and I'm just overriding this particular function. Then I have mixin, which is speaker. I have class teacher, which extends a person with speaker, which means this will have that functionality inside this particular class. Teacher string, I'm creating the default constructor here, and I'm also making sure that the super knows deep is called, so these name and age are assigned to that particular function. Now here main, I'm saying student Alice 20 and this university. So this will create a student object which is here and assign this name and age and school to that, and the super, which is person, will also be initialized, and that name and age will be set because of this super here. Next I'll say student introduce, it will call this, hi, my name is Alice, I am 20 years old and I am study at XYZ university, because it will not call the person's introduce, it will call this one because we are overriding here. Next we have runner Bob of 25 age. So this will call this particular function which extends person, implements athlete. It will use that name and age that I have specified, and if I call any of this function, for example here perform, it will call this particular and say Bob is running. Next we have teacher Carol with 30 age. So it will call this, where's the teacher here, teacher, which extends person and also has the mixin of speaker. When I initialize this way, and inside that there is nothing. So when I call introduce, since it's extending person, it's going to run this particular code here. My name is whatever the name of teacher is, and I'm dash years old. That's what's happening here. And then when I say speak, it will say speaking because I am using that mixin here along with this class. So let's go ahead and run this project to see if it works. And there you go, it's exactly same as we expected, and that's how you can try this application, this particular example, and let me know if it works. Now this program covers various object-oriented programming concepts as you saw in Dart. Next we'll go on to advanced Dart concepts including exception handling, generics, and asynchronous programming. Advanced Dart concepts. In this particular section, we're going to look at first exception handling. Now exception handling in Dart allows you to handle errors gracefully and take appropriate action when a particular error occurs. So for that, as if you're familiar with other programming languages, one of the common one is using the try catch blocks. Now using try and catch to handle exceptions, what you have to do is you'll write the try, and then inside that you put the block of code which you're trying to execute. In this case, result equal to 10 divided by 0. Now in this particular case, the result, it will give an error because divided by 0 is an exception. So it will catch that exception and give you print error and tell you what that error is. So that's the first, that's how you kind of do try and catch. So if you're calling URLs or if you're doing something that you think might not run, you can always catch this exception so your application doesn't crash. And it crashes, errors are gracefully handled inside the catch. Next is using the on clause. Now we'll use the on clause to catch specific exceptions. If you know what that exception is, for example the above one, we know what the exception is, so I can say try, and then I can say on integer division by 0 exception. So I know that exception, so it cannot divide by 0 if that is there. You can kind of keep on writing bunch of different ones and then finally catch a particular one. That's also another thing that a lot of people do to kind of give proper errors out, but this is on clause. This is how you use on clause. Next one that we look at, the finally block. Now finally block contains code that executes whether or not an exception is thrown. This is used for like cleanup of things, just so that if your application is crashing or some is closing, then you can clean up some memory over there or clean up your action. So for example, in this case I'm saying try this, catch the error, finally. So it will not like just quit, it will still call this finally and say this is the finally block, and that's what will be printed. So you can do this for a particular exception, and then if you want to let the user know in some way, you can do that. Or if you want to kind of log that error to your server, you can do that in that finally block, saying what the error was when a particular customer was running your application. You can also create custom exceptions inside Dart. Now that you can use class and implements exception. When you say implements exception, that's when it knows that you're trying to create a class of a particular exception type. Now in this case, you'll have to provide string what the cause is, and then custom exception, this dot cause is the default constructor in this particular case. So when I am calling this, I'm saying throw custom exception, this is a custom exception. So I'm kind of creating an error here by calling throw, because this will make the catch block run and catch the exception. What is the exception? I'm saying custom exception. So in this case it will say caught, and it will give me this particular message saying this is a custom exception in here. Next, let's look at, so that kind of takes care of our try exception handling. Next, let's look at generics. Now generics allow you to create classes and methods that work with different data types while providing type safety. So the first one that we'll look at is generic classes. Now in generic classes, what is type safety? First of all, like if you don't know what the type is and you want to still create a class, you can use that. Oops. Okay, so in this particular class, I created a class box of type T, and I'm saying T value box this dot value. So it can be string, it can be int, it can be anything. Void display print value value. So in this case, I'm saying I'm creating a class of box where the generic type is of the type int box equal to box. I'm passing 1 2 3 as the value, and that will be assigned to value, a value property here. And when I say display, it will display value 1 2 3. Whereas if I create string type, I can do that too and pass a string value, and that will use it as a string. In this particular case, as you see, it says value hello. So this is how you provide generic. This is how you create generic classes. Now that's not, you can also create, that's not all, you can also create generic methods. Now when you create methods, in this particular case, I have void display t. If you see, this is a function where I'm saying display t value, print value. Now I can pass integer, I can pass string to this function. So this kind of helpful to run, to write functions which do the same thing but different types of values. So this is where generics are quite very helpful. Next, let's look at asynchronous programming. Now asynchronous programming in Dart is essential for performing tasks that take time to compute, such as file input output operations or network requests. Like if you create an application where you're making a network request or some file input output operation, and it's loading a lot of data or it's slow internet connection, you don't want to block the user from not doing something else. Think about it like if you're going and checking your email and it's downloading your email, whereas you can't look at your calendar, it's very annoying. So asynchronous programming helps with that. The things that we use here is, first one is future and async wait. So with future, I'm going to give you an example here. You say future string, call the name the function fetch data, and you say async. So this is asynchronous future. This is how you define future async wait option. Now it knows that it's a future or asynchronous function fetch data. Inside that you can write now await future dot delayed, call that function. So what I'm doing is I'm simulating a delay, as you say here. I'm giving a delay of 2 seconds, and then I will return back the data fetched. Now when it's running this main, you'll have to, since it has a wait here, you have to specify that it's an async function. And I'm saying print fetching data string data equal to await fetch data. So it's going to call this await, but it will not hang the application. It will wait for it, but it will not hang the application, and it, once the data is received, it will print that data here. So that's how you do futures. Now this is kind of a single futures kind of do a single asynchronous computation, whereas there is something called as streams. And what streams do? They represent a sequence of asynchronous events over or values over time. So when I say stream, what I'm doing here is, so I create the stream integer, and I'm saying count stream int max async star, because it's a stream, because it might have multiple. In here I'm saying await. So there's a for loop. Now depending on what is the max value, it will run this that many times, and it's going to create separate threads for each one of them and call this delayed function of 1 second and then yield back I. So in this particular case, if you see, I'm calling that await for int I in count stream 5. So I'm passing the value of 5. So this will run 5 times, because I equal to 1 to I is less than equal to 5. So it will run 1 2 3 4 5, and it will give print me 1 2 3 4 5 as and when that thread is executed. In this case I'm not doing any network operation, but think about this as you're trying to download multiple images at the same time. So you can make HTTP requests here and pass all those URLs here, and that will go ahead and download those simultaneously or asynchronously at the same time. So that's where this is helpful. Next, let's look at libraries and packages. Now a lot of times you created something and you want to share it with someone else, but you don't want to share the code. So you can create libraries and packages and share with others. Also at the same time, there are a lot of libraries and packages that other people have built that you can use. Now Dart provides a way to organize your code into these libraries and packages. The libraries are a unit of like something code organization, while packages are a distribution unit. So let's see how to import libraries. Now to import libraries, you say use the command import and dart colon math. So this is a library that is provided by Dart, and it's called math, and it does a lot of, as the name suggests, it's kind of consists all the math operations. For example, in this case I'm calling the function random next int 100. So it's going to give me a random number from 0 to 100 in this particular application. Now let's look at how you can create a package. So if you want to create a package so you can distribute it to others, so this is a library that you've used, but now if you want to create a package so you can distribute to others, what you can do is you can just do in your command prompt for whatever your code is, you can just say dart create and give the name of the project that you've created. In this case, like I can say dart create hello, and then it will create that package for me. And kind of if you want to use the package, the way it works is you can say import package and then give the name of the package. So this is a package that is available http://http.dart, and I'm saying I want to import this package as HTTP because I don't want to use this every single time I'm calling that HTTP get. So this is how you use the HTTP package, and in here in your code I'm saying this is the URL. I want to know what the URL responds. Now I'm going to say await because that's a future function. I say http.get. How do I know? Because you can look at the documentation of a particular package that is provided, and then that kind of tells you how to use it. So I'm saying await http get, and I pass the URL to it, and this will get the data and it will run asynchronously, and finally when the data is back it will print this particular thing out. Now how do you, so also one other thing that you have to also do when you're using a particular package is you have to add it in. You have to create a YAML file called pubspec. So you add a package in your dependency called as pubspec.yaml, and inside that you will specify what is, for example, in this case, HTTP is what I'm using. So HTTP and then the version number. If you use any other package manager, it's exactly same as that. Next, let's go ahead and implement all the things that we have learned here. So in this particular application, what we've done is we have kind of incorporated everything that we have done till now. First, I'm importing Dart math package because I'm going to use the math functionalities provided by this. I'm also calling the package. So in the first case, it's the library that I'm importing, and this is the package that I'm using, package HTTP as HTTP. So I'm gonna, wherever I'm using this, I'm gonna use HTTP to use it. Libraries, you don't have to specify as something. Only for packages you have to do that, because packages can be from anyone else or your own package, whereas libraries are part provided by Dart. Now here is the custom exception that we learned. You can implement a custom exception by implementing exception, and inside that provide your whatever string that you want to create and create the constructor over there. Now generic classes helps you create classes which you can pass some value. It can be integer, string, whatever you want, and then on the runtime it can decide what that value is. Asynchronous function, where you have future, where it creates a thread, separate thread, and then runs it and then gives you data back whenever it's available. Same thing on main. I am now here I'm creating and I'm trying the try catch, and inside this I'm calling the custom exception. So it kind of fails by itself and prints whatever is there, exception that it caught over there. Again, generics, as I mentioned, you create the box and display it. You can have integer here, string here. So just the same class kind of works for both int and string types. Async wait, so I'm fetching data here, where I'm saying data equal to await fetch data. So I'm calling that function fetch data, and it will wait for 2 seconds and then come back and print that data out for me. Similarly for streams, I'm saying for 3 times max this particular stream, or I think I've not created the stream here, but this will run that stream 3 times and then print I in there. Next, I have also in this particular case I don't have to create a stream, because I am saying count stream, or right here, this is where I created it, where I stream int count stream, and it will run this 3 times, 3 threads, and it will give me the data back here. Next is here, using HTTP package, the package that you use. So you can call http.get with a URL that you want to call, and it will give the response back when it's available, when it's downloaded. If you want to use the library Dart math, you just say random number, random, and next int 100. So this is how you can implement all the things that we have learned about the advanced Dart concepts. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Dart for web and mobile. Now Dart is a versatile language that can be used for both web and mobile development. For mobile development, Dart is commonly used with Flutter, a UI toolkit developed by Google. For web development, Dart can be compiled to JavaScript. Now let's look at Flutter first. So Flutter, as is spelled as Flutter, Flutter is an open source UI software development kit created by Google. It is used to develop applications for Android, iOS, Linux, Mac, Windows, Google, Fuchsia, and the web from a single code base. So you have a single code base, and you can kind of run that application on multiple platforms. So that's why it's a fun software to learn or fun to know. Just in case if you want to build an application from your Dart skills to work on different platforms. Now let's look at Flutter in a little bit more detail. So I'm going to open Flutter's website, which is flutter.dev. This is how the website looks like. If you see, it works on mobile, it works on Windows computers. You can make native applications using Flutter, and as it says, Flutter 3.2 to 3.22 and Dart 3.4 have landed. So that's the latest version at the time of this recording, It's fast, reachable to user in every screen. As you can see, laptops, tablets, computers, be it iOS or Android, it will work everywhere. Even though it's built by Google, it works everywhere, and it uses Dart, and it has a lot of things that it offers, which we're going to look at it in more detail. Now, again, Flutter is an open source UI software development that created by Google. And to set it up, first, let's go to Get Started. So here Mac OS, and then I'm going to select choose your first type of app. I'm going to select iOS, and then here it will give me all the requirements that I need. I think I am good with everything. And to verify configuration, you can, this is what operating system, Mac OS. Some Flutter components require Rosetta 2. I don't need any of that, so I'm going to just leave it as it is. And it says you need Xcode. We already installed Xcode earlier. It needs CocoaPods. We're going to see when we need that. We'll install that. But you can click here and download it and install it. We have Visual Studio Code. Popular options are these. Now let's do download and install instead of VS Code install. So here, to install Flutter, download the Flutter SDK. So I'm going to go here, and there's two of them, 322 and ARM64. I think this is my machine, which is Apple Silicon. So I'm going to click on this and download it. While it's still downloading, you can always go ahead and check in your terminal by typing Flutter doctors to see if it is already available on your computer or not, if you've done it before. So as you can see, I have not installed it in this machine. So I'm gonna go ahead and check the status. Still says 29 seconds, 30 seconds is variable depending on the speed. So I'll give it some more time. Looks like my download is complete. I'm gonna go click on it and run it. So it says once it's downloaded the folder where you can install Flutter, consider creating a directory at development and extract to that particular folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this in and go to my terminal and run this. It's going to unzip everything to the development folder. You see it's done, I guess. Let's see ls. See, so development folder is there. If I look at that, Flutter is available now. Next step is to export this path. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for this particular file if I have it. Looks like I have something here. I'm going to say so I am going to go here and I will try to add it on the next line. Which is here. This is what I want to do. Skip WQ, right? And then once I've done that, to apply this change, restart all your terminal sessions. So I'm going to quit my terminal and open terminal again. Now let's see if I have Flutter installed. It looks like I do have it, and let's see if there's any issues. By calling Flutter doctor, it's going to go through my code and it will check if there is any issues. And it says to disable animation in this tool, see Google's privacy, read data by downloading Flutter, moreover Flutter. So it kind of gives you details about Flutter and it's checking if there's any issues or not. So looks like we have some issues. Let's see what these issues are. Dart on your path resolves to this particular place inside your current Flutter. But consider adding to the front of your path. That's fine. It's a warning. These are warnings. So there's some command line tools that are missing because I've never done any project. Xcode developed for iOS. Xcode installation is full. So I've already done this earlier, but I probably need to restart it. And CocoaPods, I don't have it installed. So I'm going to make sure that I install that. You can go to CocoaPods website and do it yourself too. So these are the issues that it found. So I'm going to go and solve this and make sure that there's no issues in here. After completing all the installations and whatever it was asking me to do, I am going to run Flutter Doctor again. Now every machine will have their own issues and own problems because of what you're missing or what you're not what you have not installed. So go and click Flutter Doctor again after you finish all your setup. And if you see in my case, I have everything perfectly done here. All the check marks are green, no issues found, so that's perfect. I went and installed all the CocoaPods, and I made sure that the Android licenses are I've said yes to everything. So go ahead and do those, and if you have any issues or problems, let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you. If not, let's go ahead and start with a new Flutter application. Now, to create a Flutter application, first I'm going to clear this. I will create let's see, if I'm gonna go to my desktop, and inside that I have a project called as video projects. I'm gonna go inside, or I'm gonna create a new directory for my Flutter apps, cd Flutter apps. I'm gonna go inside that project, and now next step, that to create a Flutter project, let's see, I have nothing inside here. pwd, which folder I'm Flutter apps, perfect. Now to create a Flutter project, what you do is you say Flutter create my first Flutter app. So it will go ahead and create your Flutter app. Next it says do this, I'm going to do that, and then it says run the app by calling Flutter run. It's going to go ahead and give me options. Where do you want to run this particular you want to do it on Mac OS, Mac designed for iPad, or Chrome? I'm going to select 3 for now. It will open Chrome and run my Flutter application here. It will have the basic default demo stuff. I can go ahead and click it. This has the basic code inside it, and that's why it's showing that. Now I can go and let me go to close that, open this particular folder, which is this one, and open it in Visual Studio Code. I trust the authors. So this is my entire, so I have my Android, iOS, Mac OS, all the different web, Windows, everything available here in my project, because it's built for multiple platforms. Now inside my main.dart file, which is inside my library, this is where all the code for that particular project is. Let me just increase the size so you can see it more clearly. And in here I am going to go ahead and let's see, import package, the material design, main, and run my app. That's perfect. Class my app, override, widget build, and return material app. After this, I'm going to remove everything that is there here, and I am going to say in this case home, create a scaffold, and we're going to go in detail of all these things later, but for now you can just go with whatever I'm doing. I'm going to create an app bar, and this one I'm going to give a title of with the text, and the text will say my first Flutter app, and that's good. And inside that, so that's the app bar. Next I want to create a body for my app, and inside I'll say everything should be center aligned. So child, in this particular case the body will have a child which is text hello Flutter. Okay, that's good. I'm gonna comma this, close this. So that's perfect. So I think I have closed everything properly. Now once I've do these changes, I can just do hot reload. As you saw in here in the code, it said that by pressing R I can do hot reload, but since I closed it, I'm going to go and run it again, and I'm going to do some changes and show you how that works. In this, I'm going to select the same 3. It's going to open it in Chrome, and in this thing I have my first Flutter app, hello Flutter. It'll have this debug on the top, but you can ignore that. Now if I change something in my code, let's go switch between here, remove this, save it. If you see, nothing has changed here, even though I've changed here, because I have to go here and press, let me keep it side by side, and go here and press R, and if you see it did hot reload and it updated it. So this is how you can kind of make your modifications in here, and open my app here on the side, R, and if you see updates have happening. So this is your first app with hot reload being installed. So you make changes and you just press R. You don't have to rerun the entire thing. Now let's see. Let me just close this, clear this out. So I'm going to go ahead and say Flutter build for iOS. It's going to build the app for iOS devices. And then it says it's built. After a few minutes, use this and say Flutter run, and it's going to ask me which. I don't have any simulator running. Let me open a simulator for iPhone, and let me run one more time and see if it recognizes the iOS simulator there. And it says launching on iPhone 15 Pro in debug mode. So it's going to now go ahead and run this particular project on my iPhone 15 Pro simulator. And there you go, it opens the app and it's running the app here. Again, it's the same thing. You go here, you change stuff, and you can come back. Let me also have simulator run it, and it will update, have hot reload available here. Same thing. Now if you want to do it for Android too, so for Android, what I'm going to do is Flutter build APK. It's going to build my project for Android. I don't have any simulators available right now, but as you saw, like, it works perfectly fine on Chrome and on iOS simulator. And in the next project that we will be doing, we'll actually have an Android simulator ready by then, and I will run it on this machine. I have my other machine where it's working perfectly fine, but I'll set up with the other project right here. Play around with this, whatever we did till now, and let me know if you have any issues or problems, and I'll get back to them through the comments. Thank you.